Parents drained my college fund for Golden Sister Sweet 16. Now they're regretting it. Hey everyone, I'm in a really tough spot right now, and I could use some advice or just someone to listen. My name is Emma, I'm almost 18, and I've found myself in the middle of a huge family mess that's got me questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, especially my parents. From the time I was little, I knew I wanted to do something big, like becoming a neurosurgeon. I've always been fascinated by science and medicine, and my grandparents, who were more like my second parents, fully supported this dream. My grandpa, who I was incredibly close to, wasn't a college graduate himself, but believed strongly in the power of education. He often told me stories about how he wished he'd had the opportunity to go to college and wanted to make sure I got that chance. To ensure I could focus on my studies without worrying about the financial burden, my grandpa set up a savings account specifically for my college tuition. He started this fund when I was just starting middle school, and over the years, he diligently added money to it, turning it into what should have been a $50,000 nest egg by the time I was ready to go off to college. This money was sacred. It represented not just my future, but my grandpa's commitment to me and his belief in my potential. However, my relationship with my parents has always been a bit strained, especially compared to the warmth and support I felt from my grandparents. My parents had me young and seemed to struggle with the responsibilities. They were often more focused on their own lives and problems. My mom had me shortly after she graduated high school, and my dad has always been the more laid-back type, not really pushing himself or me. When I was 16, my grandpa passed away, and that was a massive blow to me, not just emotionally, but also because I worried about my college fund. My parents reassured me that everything was taken care of and that the money was waiting for me when I needed it. Trusting them, I focused on my studies, worked hard, and even secured a partial scholarship that covered my tuition for the first 2 years of university. But I knew I needed the fund for other expenses like books, living costs, and the years the scholarship didn't cover. Recently, I decided to check the status of the account just to make sure everything was in order. I was completely blindsided to find only $10,000 left. My heart sank. When I confronted my parents, their initial reaction was to feign ignorance. They claimed they didn't know what happened, or that perhaps my grandpa hadn't saved as much as I thought. But as I pressed harder, the truth came out. They admitted they had used the money to buy my younger sister Lily a new car for her 16th birthday. They justified it by saying that since I had a scholarship, I wouldn't need the money as much, and they wanted to give Lily something special to boost her spirits during a tough time at school. I was devastated, not just by the loss of the money, but by the betrayal. I couldn't believe they would jeopardize my future for a car and then try to brush it off like it was nothing. The argument that followed was bitter and painful. My mom accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying I should be happy for my sister and not cause a scene. The fallout has been massive. My entire family is divided, with most siding with my parents, saying I should let it go and focus on my scholarship. But how can I just let it go? This was more than money. It was my grandpa's legacy and my future. Now I'm considering taking legal action to recover some of the funds, but the idea of suing my parents feels like crossing a point of no return. Yet, I feel like I have no other choice if I want to protect my education and honor my grandpa's wishes. I'm stuck, hurt, and confused. Should I fight for what was promised to me, or try to mend things with my family even if it means losing out on my dreams? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Am I being an a-hole for requesting what is rightfully mine? Thanks for listening. Update. So after a ton of arguing and some serious discussions, my dad finally agreed to cancel the car order he made for my sister's Sweet 16. That's right, he went to the dealership and managed to get a refund for the car. It was a huge relief for me because that money was supposed to be for my college, not for a fancy new car. I was pretty firm with my parents about the whole situation. I told them I'd hold off on the lawsuit I was planning, but only if I got back every single penny that was taken from my college savings account. Plus, I made sure they couldn't access the account anymore. No more surprises. You wouldn't believe the drama that caused, though. My sister started sending me these super mean texts, calling me jealous because I didn't get a car for my birthday like she was supposed to. She totally flipped out when my dad told her he was returning the car. Now, she's been bad-mouthing me to anyone who'll listen, and my mom is actually blaming me for my sister acting so spoiled. They've both been giving me the silent treatment, which honestly doesn't bother me much. We've never been that close anyway. What really matters to me is that I'm getting my college fund back. That money is my ticket to a better future, and I wasn't about to let it slip away because of a birthday gift gone way over the top. It feels good to know that I stood up for myself, and even though it's caused some tension, I know I did the right thing. Now I can focus on my studies and my plans without worrying about how I'm going to pay for school. Now for the top comments before update 2. You're not the a-hole, Opie. The rest of your family members, except your grandparents, are eagles. Your mom, sister, and father are bigger ales. The money is yours. They had no right to use it for anything, especially not to buy a car for your 16-year-old sister. Their actions make it so obvious that you aren't their favorite. Your sister is. The rest of the family members should call them out for that because no good parents should make any child feel less by having favorites. You did the right thing by threatening to sue. You need the money. It was yours, not theirs. About your sister's hateful comments? I hope she learns to be a better person as she grows older. If not, then she can just blame your parents. Good luck with your studies, Update 2. Hey everyone, I never thought things could get worse, but here I am, more shocked and hurt than ever. After my parents tried to use my college fund to buy my sister a car, I thought the worst was behind me. But it turns out, they were just getting started. A few days ago, my parents sat me down for what they called a family meeting. I thought they might finally be ready to apologize or at least talk things through rationally. Instead, they hit me with a new demand that left me reeling. They said my sister, Lily, really needed that car to get to her new job in school, and it was crucial for her well-being. They insisted I should split the money 50 to 50 inches with her, meaning I would have to give her $20,000 from my college fund. If I didn't, they threatened to kick me out of the house. I was stunned. I couldn't believe they were still trying to take money meant for my education and future. They tried to guilt-trip me, saying that as a family, we should support each other, and that I was being selfish for not helping my sister. My dad even said, "You can always take out student loans, but Lily needs this car now." I told them firmly that I wouldn't give up any more of my college fund. That money was my grandpa's legacy and my ticket to achieving my dreams. Their response was to give me an ultimatum. Either I agree to their terms or I find somewhere else to live. Feeling cornered and betrayed, I decided to take drastic action. I gathered all the evidence of what they'd done and went to the police to file for a restraining order. I explained the situation in detail, providing proof of their threats and manipulation. The police were understanding and took my case seriously. They helped me file for a temporary restraining order against my parents, which would protect me from being kicked out and ensure they couldn't touch my college fund. I also sought legal advice about potentially suing them for the misused funds. When my parents found out about the restraining order, they were furious. My dad tried to downplay the whole thing, saying I was overreacting and that it was just a family matter. But the truth was, they had crossed too many lines, and I couldn't let them jeopardize my future any longer. The restraining order was granted, giving me the protection I needed. I also moved out and found a temporary place to stay with a friend. It's been a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and relief all at once. I never wanted it to come to this, but I realized that I had to take a stand for myself and my future. My relationship with my parents and sister is likely damaged beyond repair, but I know I did the right thing. I won't let anyone take advantage of me or undermine my dreams, no matter who they are. I'm focusing on my studies and my future, knowing that my grandpa would be proud of me for standing up for myself. Thank you to everyone who has offered support and advice. It's been a tough journey, but your words have meant a lot to me. I hope my story can inspire others to stand up for themselves, even when it's incredibly difficult. Update 3. Hey everyone. I never expected to be writing another update so soon, but what happened recently has been nothing short of astonishing. Just when I thought my situation couldn't get any more dramatic, my grandpa stepped in, turning everything on its head. After I filed for the restraining order and moved out to stay with a friend, I decided to reach out to my grandpa's brother, my great-uncle, to let him know what was happening. I felt he deserved to know the truth about how my parents had been treating me and misusing the money that my grandpa had worked so hard to save for my education. What I didn't know was that my great-uncle had kept in close touch with my grandpa's side of the family, even after my grandpa's passing. He was furious when he heard about the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. Without wasting any time, he contacted my grandpa's older brother, my great-uncle, and a man of considerable influence in the family. To my complete surprise, the very next day, my great-uncle called me and said he had arranged a meeting with the family. He invited me to his house and assured me that I would have a place to stay for as long as I needed. Feeling a mix of apprehension and relief, I accepted his offer and moved into his home, where I was welcomed with open arms. During the family meeting, my great-uncle laid out everything he knew about the situation, making it clear that he would not tolerate such behavior. He then dropped a bombshell. He threatened my parents and anyone else involved that they would be cut out of his will if they didn't return the money and stop their manipulative tactics immediately. My parents were visibly shocked and scared. They knew how significant my great-uncle's financial standing was, and the thought of being cut off from his will sent them into a panic. My dad tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, but my great-uncle wasn't having any of it. He demanded they repay the full amount taken from my college fund, plus interest, within a week, or they would be permanently disinherited. The atmosphere was tense as my parents realized the gravity of their situation. Faced with the potential loss of a substantial inheritance, they quickly agreed to return the money. The next few days were a whirlwind as they scrambled to gather the funds and transfer them back into my account. Once the money was returned, my great-uncle made it clear that any further attempts to undermine my future would not be tolerated. He assured me that he would keep a close eye on things, and that I could always count on him for support. His actions not only restored my college fund, but also gave me a newfound sense of security and belonging. My sister, however, was not happy with the outcome. She continued to blame me for the loss of her car and spread rumors about me being selfish and vindictive. But with my great-uncle's backing and the support of other extended family members who now knew the truth, her words held little power. I'm incredibly grateful for my great-uncle's intervention and the support of the extended family. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, but I finally feel like I can breathe again. I'm focusing on my studies and preparing for the next steps in my education, knowing that my future is secure and that I have a strong support system behind me. Thank you all for your unwavering support and advice throughout this ordeal. Your encouragement has meant the world to me, and I hope my story can continue to inspire others to stand up for what is right, no matter how difficult it may seem. Update 4. Hey everyone, I never imagined I would have to write another update, but life has a way of throwing unexpected twists at us. After moving in with my great-uncle and feeling a glimmer of hope for my future, things took yet another shocking turn. Despite my great-uncle's stern warning and the threat of being cut out of his will, my parents still didn't return the money they had taken from my college fund. They made a few small payments, but it became clear that they were stalling, hoping I would back down or give up. They even tried to convince my great-uncle that they were working on it, but I saw through their lies. Frustrated and determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine, I decided to take the legal route. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in family disputes and financial misappropriation. With his help, I filed a lawsuit against my parents for the full amount of the misused funds, plus interest and legal fees. It was a tough decision, but I knew it was the only way to ensure my future was secure. The court process was grueling. My parents tried to paint me as an ungrateful and spoiled child who was overreacting. They argued that they had every right to use the money as they saw fit, given that they were my legal guardians. However, we had solid evidence, including my grandpa's will and detailed records of the savings account meant for my education. The courtroom battle lasted several weeks. It was emotionally draining, but I had the unwavering support of my great-uncle and my lawyer, who fought tirelessly on my behalf. The turning point came when the judge reviewed the evidence and heard testimonies from my great-uncle and other family members who confirmed my parents' deceit and manipulation. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to repay the full amount of the misused funds, plus interest and all legal fees. The total amount was significant, and it put them in a precarious financial situation. They had to liquidate some of their assets and take out loans to come up with the money. I received the full restitution, which restored my college fund and covered all my legal expenses. The victory was bittersweet. While I was relieved to have the financial security I needed for my education, it was heartbreaking to see how far my parents had fallen. Their actions had not only jeopardized my future, but also strained our family bonds beyond repair. My sister, who had been hostile and resentful throughout the ordeal, blamed me for our parents' financial problems. She continued to spread rumors and tried to turn other family members against me. However, most of the extended family, who had witnessed the court proceedings, supported me and understood the necessity of my actions. Moving forward, I've decided to focus on my education and future. Living with my great-uncle has provided me with a stable and supportive environment. I'm more determined than ever to achieve my dream of becoming a neurosurgeon and honoring my grandpa's legacy. This journey has taught me the importance of standing up for oneself, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. It's been a tough road, but I'm proud of the steps I've taken to secure my future and protect my rights. Thank you once again to everyone who has followed my story and offered support. Your encouragement has been a beacon of hope during these challenging times. I hope my story continues to inspire others to fight for what is right and never give up on their dreams, no matter the obstacles. Update 5. Hey everyone, I thought I had seen it all, but life has proven me wrong yet again. After winning the court case and finally securing my college fund, I thought the worst was behind me. However, my family found a new way to make things difficult: social media. My parents, unable to accept the court's decision and desperate to salvage their reputation, took to social media to badmouth me. They painted a picture of me as a greedy, ungrateful daughter who had turned her back on her family for money. My sister joined in, sharing posts and stories that accused me of tearing the family apart for my selfish gain. They portrayed themselves as the victims of my supposed heartlessness. These posts quickly gained traction within our extended family and community. People who had known us for years were shocked, and many took my parents' side without knowing the full story. I started receiving messages from relatives and family friends, accusing me of being cruel and selfish. Some were outright hostile, while others expressed disappointment and urged me to reconcile with my parents. It was incredibly disheartening to see how easily people believed the distorted version of events. I felt isolated and betrayed all over again. However, I decided to take the high road and not engage in a public social media battle. Instead, I reached out privately to those who had contacted me, hoping to explain my side of the story. I sent detailed messages to relatives who had reached out, explaining the truth about what had happened: the misuse of my college fund, the threats, and the eventual court battle. I included evidence from the court case, including the judge's ruling and the testimonies that had supported my claims. It was emotionally exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to clear my name and restore some semblance of peace. To my surprise, many relatives responded with shock and disbelief, not at me but at my parents. They had no idea the extent of what had transpired and were horrified to learn the truth. Some apologized for jumping to conclusions and thanked me for sharing my side. A few even admitted that they had always sensed something was off about my parents' narrative but hadn't wanted to question it without more information. The most shocking turn of events came when several key relatives decided to cut off contact with my parents altogether. They expressed their disgust at my parents' behavior and manipulation and stood by me in solidarity. They publicly announced their support for me on social media, sharing the true story and condemning the false accusations my parents had spread. It was a powerful and unexpected show of support that helped turn the tide of public opinion. This public support from relatives had a ripple effect. Friends and community members who had initially sided with my parents began to reach out to me, offering apologies and support. The social media narrative shifted, and my parents found themselves increasingly isolated. While the situation is still far from perfect, I feel a renewed sense of hope and validation. The support from relatives and friends has been a lifeline, reminding me that truth and integrity do matter. I've learned that even in the darkest times, there can be unexpected allies who stand up for what is right. As for my parents and sister, their continued attempts to smear my name have only backfired, further damaging their own reputation. I've decided to focus on my future and leave them to deal with the consequences of their actions. Thank you to everyone who has followed my journey and offered support. Your encouragement has been invaluable, and I hope my story continues to inspire others to stand up for themselves, even when it seems the whole world is against you. Update 6. Hey everyone. After the social media fiasco and the court victory, I was finally able to start college with my restored funds and the support of my great uncle and a few loyal relatives. I was excited about my new beginning, ready to immerse myself in my studies and build the future I had always dreamed of. College life has been amazing so far. I've made new friends, settled into my classes, and started participating in extracurricular activities related to my field of study. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly on the right path, free from the chaos and toxicity of my family's drama. But just as I was beginning to feel secure, my family made another move. Out of nowhere, I received a series of messages from my parents and sister, all expressing a desire to reconcile. They claimed to miss me and apologized for the hurt they had caused. They said they wanted to make things right and start fresh. To be honest, my initial reaction was anger and suspicion. After everything they had put me through, stealing my college fund, manipulating me, dragging me through a court battle, and slandering me on social media, it was hard to believe their sudden change of heart was genuine. My gut told me there was something off about their timing and their motives. I decided to confront them, demanding an explanation for their sudden desire to reconcile. Their responses were vague and filled with excuses, which only heightened my suspicion. They insisted they had seen the error of their ways and wanted to rebuild our relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was an ulterior motive behind their sudden about-face. Given the history and the timing, right as I was starting college and moving forward with my life, it felt like another trick or manipulation. I knew I had to protect myself and not fall into another trap of their making. So I made a tough decision. I told them, in no uncertain terms, to go away. I said that I didn't trust their intentions and that I needed to focus on my own life and my studies. I made it clear that after everything they had done, reconciliation was not an option, at least not now. They needed to prove through consistent actions over time that they had truly changed, and even then, I wasn't sure I could ever trust them again. My parents and sister did not take this well. They accused me of being heartless and unforgiving, trying to guilt-trip me once again. But this time, I stood firm. I blocked their numbers and social media accounts to ensure they couldn't disrupt my life any further. I shared this latest development with my great-uncle and some of the relatives who had supported me. They agreed that my family's attempt at reconciliation seemed suspicious and advised me to focus on my studies and well-being. College is my chance to build the life I want, free from the toxic influence of my parents. I've decided to prioritize my education, my mental health, and the supportive relationships I've built with my great-uncle and my new friends at school. This is my time to shine and prove to myself that I can overcome any obstacle. Thank you to everyone who has been following my journey and offering support. Your encouragement has been a beacon of light through these dark times. I hope my story continues to inspire others to stand up for themselves and pursue their dreams, no matter what challenges they face. Here's to new beginnings and a future filled with hope and success. Update 7. Hey everyone, I didn't think my story could get any more shocking, but life has proven me wrong once again. After starting college and telling my family to stay out of my life, things took a dramatic turn that I never saw coming. A few weeks into my first semester, I received a message from a distant relative with some jaw-dropping news. My father had sold our family home. The house where I grew up, where all our memories were made, was now gone. The reason? He needed the money to pay for the legal fees from my court case, the very case where I won back my college fund, and they were ordered to cover my legal expenses. I was stunned. My parents had been so confident they would win the case, they never anticipated having to pay such a hefty sum. When the judge ruled in my favor, it left them in a dire financial situation. They had tried to scrape together the money by liquidating assets and taking out loans, but it wasn't enough. Ultimately, they were forced to sell the house to cover the remaining costs. The news spread quickly through the family, and the reactions were mixed. Some relatives felt sorry for my parents, viewing them as victims of a harsh consequence. Others saw it as poetic justice for their deceit and manipulation. As for me, I was conflicted. While I felt a sense of vindication, I also couldn't ignore the sadness of seeing my childhood home sold off because of their actions. My sister, predictably, blamed me entirely for the loss. She accused me of destroying the family and taking everything from them. Her bitterness only deepened, and she made it clear she wanted nothing more to do with me. My parents, now homeless and struggling to rebuild their lives, reached out once more, begging for reconciliation and help. This time, however, I felt no guilt in refusing. They had brought this upon themselves with their decisions and actions. They chose to misuse my college fund, to manipulate and threaten me, and to drag me through a painful legal battle. The sale of the house was the natural consequence of those choices. I explained to them that while I was sorry for their situation, I couldn't be responsible for fixing the mess they had created. I needed to focus on my future and my education. I offered my help in finding them resources and services that could assist them, but I made it clear that I would not be drawn back into their toxic cycle. Living with my great-uncle continues to provide the stability and support I need. He has been a rock through all of this, helping me stay focused on my studies and reminding me of the importance of self-preservation. I'm excelling in my classes and making the most of the opportunities before me. This whole ordeal has been a harsh lesson in the complexities of family dynamics and the importance of standing up for oneself. It's been a painful journey, but I know I am stronger for it. My grandpa's legacy and belief in my potential continue to motivate me every day, and I am determined to make the most of the life he wanted for me. Thank you all for your unwavering support and encouragement. Your messages and advice have been invaluable, and I hope my story can serve as a beacon of strength for others facing similar challenges. Remember, it's okay to stand your ground and prioritize your well-being, even when it feels like the hardest thing to do. Here's to forging ahead and creating a future built on strength, resilience, and integrity. Update 8. A few days ago, my parents reached out to me again, this time with a desperate plea. They explained that after selling the house to pay for my legal fees, they had exhausted all their resources. They had been staying with friends and extended family, but those arrangements were falling through. They were now facing the very real possibility of being homeless. Their solution? They wanted me to ask my great-uncle to forgive them and allow them to move in with him. They said that since he had taken me in, it was only fair that he should help them out as well. They insisted that with my influence, I could convince him to forgive their past actions and offer them a place to stay. I was stunned by their audacity. After everything they had done, misusing my college fund, manipulating me, slandering me on social media, and dragging me through a grueling court battle, they had the nerve to ask for my help to secure them a place in my great uncle's home. I knew I had to handle this carefully. My great uncle had been incredibly supportive and generous, and I didn't want to put him in an uncomfortable position. I decided to have an open and honest conversation with him about the situation. When I explained my parents' request, my great uncle was both shocked and disappointed. He couldn't believe they had the gall to ask for such a favor after all they had put me through. He made it clear that while he sympathized with their plight, he couldn't condone their actions or reward their behavior by letting them move in. He also reminded me that their manipulative tendencies were still very much a part of their character, and allowing them into his home could create a toxic environment for both of us. He reassured me that I had his full support and that I didn't owe my parents anything after the way they had treated me. Feeling validated and supported, I relayed my great uncle's decision to my parents. As expected, they didn't take it well. They accused me of being heartless and vindictive, claiming that I was enjoying their suffering. They tried to guilt-trip me once more, but this time I was resolute. I told them that while I didn't take pleasure in their hardship, I couldn't in good conscience ask my great uncle to forgive them and take them in. They needed to take responsibility for their actions and find a way to rebuild their lives without dragging others down with them. This experience has reinforced the importance of setting boundaries and protecting oneself from toxic influences, even when they come from family. It's a painful lesson, but one that has made me stronger and more determined to build a life based on honesty, integrity, and self-respect. As I continue my studies and work towards my dreams, I'm grateful for the support of my great uncle and the new friends I've made at college. Their encouragement reminds me that I am on the right path and that I have the strength to overcome any challenges that come my way. Thank you once again to everyone who has followed my journey and offered their support. Your words of encouragement have been a source of strength and comfort. I hope my story continues to inspire others to stand up for themselves and prioritize their well-being, no matter the obstacles they face. Here's to a future filled with hope, resilience, and the courage to forge our own paths. Parents forgot my birthday 3 times because their golden child threw another tantrum, but after 15 years of neglect. Growing up, my family looked pretty normal from the outside, but inside, it was like we were living in 2 different worlds. I was the older brother, just by a year, but in our house, it felt like I was from a different planet compared to my sister. My sister Emily was born with chronic health problems and a physical disability. Her life was a series of doctor's visits, special accommodations, and a lot of pain. Mom and Dad did everything to make her life smoother and happier, which I get, but it meant they didn't really show up for me the same way. From as early as I can remember, my role was the healthy one, the easy kid, which meant I was expected to fend for myself a lot. My parents were always making special time for Emily, planning things that could accommodate her limitations. That stuff takes a lot of time and energy, I know, but it left little room for anything else, including me. When Emily and I were little, I remember being excited about family outings, thinking maybe this time we'd all go together. But more often than not, I ended up staying with a neighbor or dropped off at Aunt Linda's place. It was always, "We'll bring you next time," or "It's just easier if Emily doesn't have to travel too far today." Those next times for me seemed to never come. It wasn't just the trips, it was the everyday things too, playing in the park, going for ice cream, or just watching a movie together. They always chose something that fit Emily's needs, which I understand, she needed more care. But it often felt like they forgot they had another kid who also wanted to feel like part of the family. I think the first time I really felt the sting of being the forgotten one was during one of my birthdays. It must have been my 8th or 9th birthday. There was no party, no special dinner. I woke up that day thinking maybe they had a surprise planned, but the whole day went by and nothing happened. They had taken Emily to a concert she had been looking forward to, something they had planned for months, and it just so happened to fall on my birthday. They came back talking about how much fun it was, how it was such a good show, and I just sat there feeling pretty invisible. The next day, my mom realized they'd missed my birthday and tried to make up for it by handing me a $5 gift card they had picked up last minute. It was a kind gesture, sure, but it felt so afterthought, so insignificant compared to the effort they put into making sure Emily could see her favorite band live. As we got older, this pattern didn't really change. It was always about what Emily needed, and I was expected to understand, to not make a fuss. I spent a lot of time alone or at friends' houses, anywhere I felt a bit more seen. I remember one year I was turning 10. Double digits, a big deal for any kid. I had been dropping hints about wanting to do something fun as a family, maybe hit the local arcade or have a pizza party at home. But as the day drew closer, I could tell that nothing was planned. No whispers of secret plans, no hidden gifts around the house, nothing. On the morning of my birthday, it was like everyone had forgotten. There was no happy birthday at breakfast. It was just cereal as usual and conversations about what Emily needed for the day. She had been having a rough week health-wise, so I understood the focus was on her, but it stung. It really did. I went to school that day, hoping my parents would remember and maybe surprise me when I got back home. But when I walked back in through the door that afternoon, it was clear that wasn't happening. There was no surprise, no cake waiting on the counter. My mom was on the phone, sorting out some new therapy sessions for Emily, and my dad was at work, as usual. It felt like any other day, except it was supposed to be my day. I didn't say anything. What was the point? It wouldn't make them remember or care. I just went to my room and tried to make the best of it. My friends at school had said happy birthday, and they even pooled together some change to buy me an ice cream at lunch, so that was nice. It helped a little. Made the day feel a bit less ordinary. The next day, my mom must have seen the date on something because she suddenly realized they'd missed my birthday. She apologized and said things had just been so hectic with Emily. I nodded, said it was okay, but it wasn't really. They promised we'd do something that weekend to make up for it. Come the weekend, though, plans fell through again. Emily wasn't feeling up for going out, and instead of maybe doing something at home, we ended up just watching some of her favorite movies. My dad picked up a cake, one of those pre-made ones from the grocery store, but it was almost an afterthought. A consolation prize, not a celebration. This pattern wasn't new, it was just more of the same. Another year, another forgotten celebration. It wasn't just about the party or gifts, it was about feeling recognized, feeling like I mattered too. But each missed birthday was a reminder that in the grand scheme of things, my needs, my desires, were always on the back burner. By the time my 12th birthday rolled around, I had lowered my expectations. I didn't bother hinting or asking for anything. It was easier not to hope for something that wasn't going to happen. That year, I spent my birthday like it was just any other day. I did my homework, played video games, and helped around the house. My parents did remember to say happy birthday this time, at least. There was a quick hug, a brief acknowledgement, and then back to the usual routine. Emily had a doctor's appointment that day, so most of the attention was on getting her ready and out the door. I think that was the birthday that hurt the most. Not because it was dramatically bad or anything crazy happened, but because it was so painfully normal. There was no neglect out of malice. It was just neglect out of habit. They were so used to pouring all their energy into Emily's needs that mine just didn't register on their radar. It wasn't just birthdays either. School achievements, hobbies, things I was proud of, they all just sort of got nodded at and then brushed aside. As I got older, the disappointment started to harden into something else. Resignation. I stopped expecting things to be different. Friends' birthday parties were a glimpse into what it could be like, with parents who planned and celebrated their kids. I enjoyed those moments, basked in the warmth of those celebrations, and then went home to my reality. In therapy, when we started going a few years later, one of the therapists pointed out that these missed moments were significant. They weren't just little slips. They were patterns that showed where the priorities lay. Discussing it in those sessions, I tried to express how these patterns made me feel unimportant, secondary. My parents listened, but there was always an excuse, always a reason why things had to be the way they were. They promised to try harder, to be more aware. But the habits of a lifetime are hard to break. Looking back now, I can see how these early experiences shaped my expectations about life and relationships. They taught me to not ask for too much, to not expect too much. That way you can't be disappointed. But they also taught me about the kind of parent I want to be someday. Someone who remembers, who celebrates each child for who they are, not just what they need. My grandparents were the unsung heroes of my childhood. With my parents usually wrapped up in the endless cycle of managing Emily's health issues, it was Grandma and Grandpa who stepped in to fill the void. They didn't do anything extraordinary, but in my world, they were a beacon of normalcy and warmth, a contrast to the cold routine at home. Grandma had a way of making every little thing seem special. She had this old, faded recipe book, and every time I visited, she'd let me pick a recipe to try out together. It didn't matter if it was her famous chocolate chip cookies or something as simple as spaghetti. It was our thing. It was during these cooking sessions that she'd share stories about her own childhood, about the mischief she got into with her siblings. I lived for those stories. They were a window into a world where I felt connected, where I wasn't just the other child. Grandpa, on the other hand, was the quiet strength of the pair. He was a man of few words, but he had a presence that made you feel secure. He loved model trains, and the basement of their house was dedicated to his elaborate setups. He'd spend hours down there, tweaking and fixing, and I was always welcome to join. It wasn't just about the trains, it was about sharing something he loved with me, something that wasn't overshadowed by the constant concerns that hung over my family. Their house was my refuge. The days I spent there were the days I felt most like a kid, not just a bystander in my sister's life. They celebrated every report card, every small achievement that my parents often overlooked. When I scored my first goal in soccer, Grandma made a cake and Grandpa put up a little display in the living room with the ball I'd used in the game. They made it seem like the biggest deal, and that meant everything to me. But life has a way of reminding you that nothing stays the same. 3 years ago, Grandma got sick. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow decline that seemed to parallel the gradual fading of my childhood innocence. Her vibrant energy dimmed, and the kitchen, once the heart of our interactions, grew silent. I watched helplessly as the disease took hold, turning our cooking sessions into brief, strained visits where she'd mostly sleep while I sat by her side, holding her hand, missing her even though she was right there. When she passed away, it was like losing a part of my foundation. The funeral was a blur, a procession of people offering their condolences, saying how wonderful she had been, how she'd be missed. I nodded, thanked them, but inside I felt a hollowing out, like someone had scooped out the center of me. Grandpa changed after Grandma's death. The spark that had been in his eyes when he showed me a new train setup or told a joke, it faded. The basement gatherings became less frequent, and then they stopped altogether. He moved through the days mechanically, a routine without joy. The model trains gathered dust, and our conversations grew stilted, both of us lost in our grief. It wasn't long before the decision was made to move him to a nursing home in another city. The house, too big and too full of memories, was too much for him alone. I understood the reasons, but it felt like another anchor being lifted, leaving me adrift. Our visits became monthly trips that were more about ensuring he was okay rather than sharing in anything meaningful. I'd sit in the sterile visitor's room making small talk, both of us avoiding the gaping absence that Grandma left behind. With Grandma gone and Grandpa far away, my buffer against the loneliness at home was gone. The transition back to life where my sister's needs dominated was harder than ever. The contrast was stark. Where my grandparents had made me feel seen, at home, I was more invisible than before. The routines continued. Emily's needs continued to shape our family life, and I continued to fade into the background. The isolation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. During family gatherings, conversations would circle around Emily's latest treatments or her challenges. I'd chip in where I could, try to share bits about school or friends, but it often felt like speaking into a void. My words seemed to dissipate the moment they left my lips, unimportant and fleeting. Even at school, I started to withdraw. Friends invited me to hang out, but I found myself declining more often, opting instead to spend time alone. It was easier than explaining why I was down or why I didn't feel up to pretending everything was okay. They knew about Emily, of course, but no one really understood the full weight of living in her shadow, of having my own needs and desires perpetually sidelined. The worst part was feeling guilty for these feelings. Emily didn't choose her health issues, and I knew my parents were doing their best under tough circumstances. But knowing that didn't ease the sting of neglect, nor did it fill the growing gap within me, a space where familial warmth once lived. As I navigated this new reality, I realized that I needed to find new sources of support, new ways to feel valued. I turned to teachers, to coaches, any adult who might offer a word of encouragement or a moment of recognition. Each small acknowledgement felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I could be more than just the healthy sibling, more than just the other child. Looking back, losing my grandparents not only marked the end of their physical presence in my life, but also the end of my childhood in many ways. It forced me to face the imbalance in my family head-on and to start seeking ways to carve out my own space, my own identity, independent of the family drama that had so long defined me. Sibling rivalry is typical in most families, but when your sibling has special needs, the dynamics can shift drastically. The term rivalry doesn't even feel right. It's not like we were ever competing on the same level. Emily's needs always came first, which I understood on a rational level, but emotionally, it was a whole different story. It all came to a head one evening that felt like any other at first. I was in the middle of a gaming session, a rare moment of relaxation in a house that often felt more like a revolving door of therapists and medical crises. Emily was having a tough day, more pain than usual, which made her short-tempered and moody. Mom and Dad were doing their best to comfort her, but nothing was really working. That's when things took a turn for the worse. In her frustration, Emily lashed out. It wasn't the first time she had a tantrum, but this time, My gaming console bore the brunt of her anger. Controllers flew, the console crashed to the floor, and the game I was in the middle of vanished into a screen of static. I was stunned, just staring at the wreckage of what was my only real escape from the everyday stress. When I looked to my parents for support, hoping for once they'd see the impact of Emily's actions on me, all I got was a hurried apology as they scooped her up to calm her down. They were more concerned with her tears, her reasons for the outburst, than the fact that she'd destroyed my property, something that mattered to me. The message was clear. Her immediate needs were more important than any of my feelings or possessions. That night, after Emily calmed down and everyone else seemed to move on, I was left with a broken console and a growing resentment that no amount of silent brooding could dissipate. I lay in bed thinking about how unfair it was that her needs not only came first, but seemed to be the only needs that mattered. It wasn't her fault she was in pain or that she had limitations, but why did that mean I had to be the collateral damage? Over the next few days, I tried to brush off the incident, but the frustration simmered. I found myself snapping over small things, withdrawing further into myself. My parents noticed but misinterpreted my mood as typical teenage angst, attributing it to school stress or just a phase. They suggested maybe I needed more sleep or should try talking to someone, like a counselor at school. It felt like another dismissal, another way of saying that my problems weren't as significant. It was around this time that I first brought up the idea of family therapy. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was desperate for anything that might help us communicate better. To my surprise, my parents agreed. Maybe they realized things were starting to spiral, or maybe they hoped a professional could smooth over the growing cracks in our family dynamics. Either way, we found ourselves sitting in a stark, quiet room across from a therapist who seemed genuinely interested in hearing from each of us. Therapy sessions started to become part of our weekly routine. While they were supposed to be a space for all of us to improve our communication and understanding, it quickly felt like we were just going through the motions. My parents, eager to rectify their past neglect, initially threw themselves into the process with a kind of desperate energy. For a brief period, it seemed like we were making genuine progress. During these sessions, the therapist encouraged us to share our feelings openly, which was a new and uncomfortable experience for everyone. I talked about feeling like an outsider in my own family, about the pain of having my needs and interests consistently overlooked. It was liberating to voice these feelings, to have them acknowledged by a professional who didn't immediately dismiss them as teenage drama. My parents listened, really listened, for the first time in a long time. They seemed shocked to hear how deeply their actions, or lack thereof, had affected me. There were tears, apologies, and promises to do better. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that change was possible, that we could find a new normal where I wasn't just an afterthought. To put these good intentions into practice, we started implementing more structured family time. It was decided that once a week, we would do something as a family that didn't revolve around Emily's medical needs or preferences. It was a small concession, but it meant the world to me. The first few times were awkward, but also kind of nice. We went to movies, visited museums, and even spent an afternoon bowling, activities that had no direct connection to hospitals, therapy, or medical discussions. However, the shift in focus didn't go unnoticed by Emily. She had grown accustomed to being the center of our parents' universe, and the sudden change sparked a deep-seated jealousy. It started with small comments here and there, subtle digs about how much fun we must have had without her, or how it was nice for her to have some quiet time at home. Her tone was light, but the underlying message was clear. She felt left out, and she wasn't happy about it. The situation escalated quickly. During what was supposed to be a calm family dinner, Emily broke down. She accused our parents of neglecting her, of forgetting about her needs in favor of spending time with me. Her reaction was intense, fueled by a mix of genuine fear of being left out and a manipulation tactic she had learned to use effectively. My parents, caught off guard and riddled with guilt, stumbled over themselves to reassure her, to apologize for making her feel that way. The backlash was immediate. Our scheduled outings became fewer and farther between, and when they did happen, they were overshadowed by the tension of Emily's displeasure. My parents were torn, trying to balance their newfound commitment to me with their instinctive need to cater to Emily's emotional and physical health. It was a balancing act they couldn't manage, and slowly but surely, things started to revert to how they had always been. Feeling guilty and responsible for the turmoil, I suggested maybe we should just go back to how things were before. Maybe it was easier if I just sucked it up and let things be centered on Emily. But the therapist, to their credit, pushed back. They pointed out that this reaction was exactly why we were in therapy, to break these unhealthy patterns, not to reinforce them. So we continued with the sessions, each one becoming more charged than the last. Emily's feelings of jealousy and abandonment became a central theme, and much of our time was spent addressing her fears and insecurities. It felt like we were moving backwards, focusing on her even in a space that was supposed to be about fixing the broader family dynamics. In a particularly heated session, Emily made a startling accusation. She claimed that our parents were favoring me over her, that they loved me more because I was the normal one. The accusation stung, and it threw our parents into a tailspin of self-doubt and confusion. They reassured her, sometimes at the expense of their own emotional well-being, and certainly at the expense of the progress we had made. It was a painful cycle to watch and even harder to be a part of. I began to feel like the villain in my own family's story, simply for wanting a bit of the attention and love that came so freely to Emily. I found myself withdrawing again, pulling back from the therapy sessions and from my efforts to be more present in the family. What was the point if it only caused more pain? The breaking point came when my parents, in an effort to manage Emily's increasing distress, suggested we all attend a different therapist, one that could perhaps offer a new perspective on our family's issues. They thought maybe a fresh start could smooth things over, but I saw it for what it was, an attempt to placate Emily and perhaps find someone who would tell them they were doing the right thing by focusing so much on her. I felt defeated. All the talks, all the sessions, all the promises of change, it seemed like they were just empty words, easily blown away by the first sign of difficulty. I was tired of fighting, tired of feeling like my presence was a burden or a cause of conflict. So I pulled away, resigned to the status quo, where Emily's world was the only one that mattered, and I was just living in it. The cycle of therapy sessions and rehashed promises became too much. I was tired, emotionally and mentally drained from the constant tug-of-war for my parents' attention. It seemed like no matter what we discussed in those sessions, the outcome was always the same. Emily's needs overshadowed everything else, and my feelings were just side notes that were acknowledged but never really addressed. The breaking point came during a particularly tense therapy session. We were all seated awkwardly, the air thick with unspoken frustrations. The therapist had been trying to guide us toward a more balanced family dynamic, but the efforts felt futile. My parents were obviously stressed, torn between their two children, and Emily was visibly upset, feeling like she was losing her grip on the only reality she knew, one where she was the primary focus. I had prepared myself to speak openly that day, to really lay out how I felt. I needed them to understand the depth of my isolation within the family. So, I took a deep breath and started talking. I didn't just skim the surface with general statements about feeling left out. I dove deep. I shared how hurt I was that my achievements and milestones felt ignored, how it felt like my birthdays were just days on the calendar to them, how I felt more like a roommate than a son. The room was quiet as I spoke, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's holding back a storm. My parents looked shocked, perhaps not realizing how much their actions, or lack thereof, had affected me. Emily, however, seemed agitated, shifting uncomfortably in her chair as I laid out my feelings. When it was their turn to respond, the reaction was not what I had hoped for. My parents were defensive. They started with apologies, as they had before, but quickly shifted to justifying their actions. They talked about the complexity of Emily's health issues, how her needs weren't just preferences, but necessities. They said they were doing their best under difficult circumstances. Emily then spoke, her voice shaky with emotion. She accused me of trying to make her feel guilty for things beyond her control, of being selfish for wanting what she saw as equal attention. The words stung. It wasn't about competing with her, it was about feeling like part of the family. The therapist intervened, trying to steer the conversation back to a constructive path, but the damage was done. The air was thick with hurt feelings and accusations. I felt a mix of anger and despair. It was clear that no amount of talking was going to change the fundamental dynamics in our family. My parents were too entrenched in their roles as caregivers for Emily to see beyond her immediate needs, and Emily herself was not ready to see our family as anything but centered around her. The session ended with a tense agreement to keep trying, but as we left, I knew something had shifted for me. The faint hope I had held onto, that therapy could bring us to a better understanding, had evaporated. I was done. Done trying to fight for attention. Done trying to explain my feelings to people who couldn't seem to grasp their importance. Over the next few weeks, I withdrew. I spent more time alone, focusing on school and my own interests outside of home. My parents noticed but seemed unsure how to bridge the gap that had widened between us. They made tentative attempts to connect, asking about my day or my plans for the weekend, but it felt hollow, like too little, too late. Emily also noticed my withdrawal, but her response was mixed. Part of her seemed relieved to have the spotlight firmly back on her, but there was also a tentative curiosity about my newfound independence. She asked me a few times about my activities, a flicker of interest in her eyes, but we were both too scarred from past conflicts to really open up again. As the weeks turned into months, my plans for the future began to take shape with more clarity. I realized that I needed to find my own path, one that didn't involve waiting for my family to recognize my needs. I started researching colleges, scholarships, and programs that interested me, pouring my energy into building a life where I didn't feel like a secondary character. My relationship with my parents remained strained. We spoke, we shared meals, we lived under the same roof, but there was an unspoken understanding that things were different now. They continued their focus on Emily, now more cautious in their interactions with me, perhaps afraid of sparking another confrontation. The suggestion to switch therapists came up again, this time with a more urgent tone from my parents. They were hopeful that a new perspective could mend the fractures within our family. But for me, it felt like agreeing to start a book you already knew the ending of, pointless and exhausting. I declined. I told them it was too late for new beginnings in therapy. That ship had sailed, and I was already looking toward new horizons. They were disappointed, but there was also a resignation in their acceptance, a recognition that they had missed too many opportunities to make things right. I wasn't angry anymore, just resolved. Resolved to move forward, to build my own world where I was more than just an afterthought. It wasn't the family dynamic I had hoped for, but it was one I could live with, knowing I had tried, knowing I had finally chosen to prioritize my own well-being. After I moved out and reduced contact with my family, life started feeling more like mine. I wasn't just the older brother always sidelined by my sister Emily's needs anymore. I was just me, living my own life, making my own rules in a new city. The decision to go low contact wasn't easy, family is family after all, but the constant neglect had taken its toll, and I needed space to figure out who I was outside of that dynamic. At first, the quiet was strange. No background noise of Emily's needs or the chaos that usually surrounded them. It was just me and my thoughts, which was scary and freeing at the same time. I found a small apartment, got a job that I didn't mind, and started piecing together a routine that was all my own. When my first birthday rolled around after the move, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a call if I was lucky. But the day came and went with silence. No calls, no texts, nothing. It hit harder than I expected. It's not like I wanted much, just a sign that they remembered I existed outside of Emily's world. I ended up spending the day alone, reflecting on everything that had led to this point. It was a sobering reminder of why I had put distance between us. I let it slide without making a fuss. Instead, I used it as motivation to invest more into my new life. I started making friends, really good ones. People who showed up for me, who remembered small details and made plans. We'd hang out after work, grab drinks, or just chill at someone's place playing games or watching movies. Little by little, I began to feel part of something again, a community where I wasn't just the other kid. The next year, I approached my birthday with a new mindset. I didn't bother checking my phone for missed calls or messages from home. Instead, I planned a big night out with my friends. We hit a couple of bars, laughed more than I had in years, and celebrated until the early hours. It was hands down the best birthday I'd ever had. For the first time, I wasn't an afterthought, but the main event, and it felt amazing. Days later, curiosity got the better of me, and I called home. Sure enough, they had forgotten again. This time there wasn't even an apology, just straight into how things were going with Emily. It stung a bit, but it also solidified my resolve that I was doing the right thing by keeping my distance. My life was here now, with people who valued me. By the third year in my new city, my birthday had become something I genuinely looked forward to. I threw another big party, this time even bigger. We rented out a space, had a DJ, the works. It was a blast. Friends, both old and new, showed up to celebrate. It was during this party, surrounded by people who cared about me, that I fully realized the weight of what I had been missing out on all those years. Once again, I made that after-the-fact call to my family. As expected, they had forgotten my birthday once more. But this time, I didn't even bother bringing it up. We chatted briefly about mundane things, and that was it. That call was short and perfunctory, a stark contrast to the warmth and joy of my celebrations. It confirmed that while they were my family by blood, my real family was made up of the friends who stood by me. The difference in these relationships was stark. With my friends, I was never an add-on. I was integral. They didn't just remember my birthday, they made it special. They didn't just listen to how my day went, They were a part of my day. We supported each other through job changes, breakups, successes, and failures. We built a network of mutual care and respect, something I had always longed for, but never quite experienced with my own family.